by combining historical, climate, food, and economic data so you can make informed decisions as we shift into a new era. Here's what was, this is what's coming. Our world is never going back to 2019, so what will the new era look like? And most importantly, what is immediate that will affect the pocketbook and the outlook into next year so we can all get ready? Thank you for joining. I'm your host, David Dubine. Right along here with Ransom Godwin. What's going to be a cost of living rise immediately? The seafood industry, high tariffs, inflation. What's the price of your fish? You can't get away from it. Seafood shipments. Wherever you look, something is turned off, unavailable, more expensive, and it doesn't have to be more expensive. A 25% import duty, and then even some of the seafood, 45% duty rate. Why would you do that during a recession? Makes no sense. That's all planned, in my opinion. I know we've gone around, Ransom and myself, many a show saying it seems like it's all planned over the last year, but truly, turning off the oil, giving away oil, what is our world going to shape up to be? Like, we can look at all these factors and all these news stories. Okay, those are like points on a map. But what is it, that wider picture that connects all of those? And I think that's what we're going to get into tonight. Ransom Godwin, thank you for getting the streams ready tonight. And if anybody's listening out there, we're also streaming live here from freedomslips.com, Studio A, Revolution Radio, right over onto vigilante.tv, Rumble, Ransom's YouTube channel, Mountain High Time, and my YouTube channel, Mini Ice Age Conversations, the podcast. Facebook channels for Ransom and myself, Facebook, Mini Ice Age, LinkedIn, and Twitch, David Dubine. You can find all those links right over in the Adapt 2030 channel. So many happenings. So Ransom, to try to make sense of what's even happened in these last days, minutes, literally, this news stream is an amplification. By the minute, it seems more intense. So we've passed the 30th when the Vatican had to have all of their assets back under control in the Vatican Bank. The Shemitah has ended since we spoke last. Now what? All those marks in time are complete. Now what? Was that the calm before the storm? Or are we about to hit something in the southern hemisphere, volcanic winter? Or what's inbound, might I ask? So everybody out there, welcome. Thank you for spending your valuable time with us tonight.
I think they're going to do a South China Sea war here. That's what I think is going on. If you saw the other day, they had North Korea tied up in that, and I guess that you could argue it, but basically they've been a Chinese proxy for some time. And what I'm seeing through all of the different headlines from different directions is China's making their move on control of the U.S., and it seems like, I'm not going to say capitulation, but it may be looking that way. And then you have the U.S., in my opinion, pushing this war in Ukraine past even what I think the Russians are willing to do. I'm starting to see signs of them backing off, possibly. But at the same time, we got our own president of the United States, trying to scare us into underneath the table. And then maybe they are planning on doing something like we've talked about before, maybe a limited exchange of weapons. I was going to show everybody this article that I just popped up off of Drudge Report here. $290 million on anti-radiation drugs for the U.S. government there. You think they're going to be passing those out to the civilians yet? And think about it.
Not a chance.
Right? Not too long ago, they had the little predictive programming PSA in New York City talking about, what to do in case of a nuclear emergency, about how they were trying to tell people that they could just go hide in the basement and everything will be fine, to get indoors, I guess, so that the rubble will fall on you. None of that commercial made sense. It's just like the 50s, 60s duck and cover scare propaganda. But this time, we have some really, I'm going to say, sick people in charge around the world, and they might just, not be satisfied with our previous explosions on people in Japan, and they might want to look at it again. After all, the generation that fought that war is about gone, pretty much totally gone here in the United States. There's not too many, if any, World War II vets left. And so, they're pulling all of these things, it seems, right after they kind of all died off. And Biden is basically telling people the same thing that I said a month ago, which was that we're the closest nuclear war since 61. I said I got it wrong. They're saying 62, but I thought it was 61. It might be a Mandela. I don't know. Anyway, the last high risk nuclear crisis, supposedly. Tensions are higher than that, they say. But I doubt very seriously that, they're going to blow up Martha's Vineyard or anything like that. But, maybe one of the failing industrial cities in the U.S. If you guys saw the map of, they might even use North Korea to do it. It just seems like, he's such a pansy there in North Korea, and it doesn't make any sense whenever he does what he does. So he fired a missile all the way across the sea, across Japan, on the other side of it, near Hawaii almost, I guess just to show that he could do that. And then, think about the predictive programming we've been hearing for months and months and months and months on the conflict in Ukraine and Russia. But on the back burner, you got, look, our ex-president had top secret stuff, and it looks like it was nuclear stuff about another nation. Maybe a nation that we didn't want everybody to know had nukes, like, I don't know, Ukraine or somebody like that. And then you're seeing countries like Poland basically asking the United States to move nuclear weapons into their country on the border, so that they can, somehow feel safer with that. But on the financial market, everybody's saying, you know what, it's about that time. Everything's going to collapse. I mean, that's what I'm hearing from everybody. And even people that were saying the opposite not too long ago are now having to admit that, things are rough out there. But don't worry, we're sending billions of dollars to Ukraine, and our government's spending a couple $100 million on anti-radiation drugs just in case. By the way, do you actually have some of those in your go bag? That's something that I stocked in my go bag. Not that I ever thought a nuclear war would happen. It just seems like one of those things, like, maybe a firearm, condom. There's numerous other things that, you might want to use or might need to use in the future. Just kidding. But really, it's a crazy place we're living in right now. And then, I'm sure you saw the software CEO arrested in China storing U.S. election data, but they told us that could never happen and that was impossible, and don't worry about it, go back to sleep. But that's one of those things. The New York Times is kind of getting egg in their face. Zero Hedge is making fun of them basically with this article that says New York Times right-wing conspiracy theory comes true in less than 24 hours about the election meddling that appears to be going on. And I know you're not allowed to say that, but I'm not saying it. It's Zero Hedge and the New York Times that's saying it, and the Chinese government. So I don't know. That's where we sit. Tensions are high right now. And if you guys want to just think about what's going on right now, I don't know if you saw the videos coming out of China of how they're applying their COVID lockdown rules at this point. But they're not just out there in the little white medical suits anymore. They got full auto assault rifles, if you want to call them that. And they're pointing guns at people now. So it's the world right now is way past concentration camps and authoritarian governments. It's just amazing that the delusion is going on. Like, everyone's still denying it. I even saw some new mask that came out in China that, they don't have to take it off anymore. So you could just totally keep your face covered, and they'll just come and shove a big Q-tip down a tube that's in the front of your mask down your throat. And people act like that's not coming here. And I beg to differ. There's a number of things we can get into, including our government now admitting that they're going to implement the same exact same, basically, credit score system as China recently. Matter of fact, I have that article up. When you respond, I'll show them that. But think about that point. Is our government is already taking the blueprint from China, and for whatever reason it might be, which a lot of people are saying will be climate reasons, overpopulation reasons, and a number of any other, geopolitical talking points that they use, terrorism, smuggling, human trafficking, for any of these reasons. Now, all of the countries are prepared and ready and to lock down at any time. And you might have saw that article I sent you through Skype that shows Israel, beefing up their security, which with basically sentry guns. And if anybody's ever played a video game, it's basically an automated AI run gun that you put on a border of something, so a person doesn't actually have to be there, and the AI will monitor people coming up to the border. It's so funny that they're so hardcore about their border. We're not really so much here, but you can imagine this. They're putting robot guns up on the fence, and I've been talking about this for a long time. And then you have a joke of Elon Musk bot that came out, and a lot of people were kind of saying, oh, look at that, it's goofy, it can barely walk. But remember this, that's the $20,000 affordable model. That's a toy. That's nothing compared to what that they have. And they've been steadily showing that they do have it, but these automated systems are being implemented. I could see that in 10 years, there's no way that you're going to recognize this earth at all, as far as geopolitically or human rights wise or any of these things. It's way past a Twilight Zone episode at this point. So let me find that article and I'll show them that. But just think about that. They say it's non-lethal now, but it's not hard to convert it over to a lethal thing if so happen a war broke out in the Middle East.
Yeah, that's a whole cranium full right there to process. Kim Jong-un throwing the missiles over into the Pacific just because he could. I mean, who's the person who has the world record for typing the most words in a minute using your nose? I mean, just because you can. It's becoming obviously grotesque now that things are in motion, that for some reason the plans need to be sped up or whatever it is to still retrieve out of this iteration of cycle of us reaching some pinnacle in a fourth turning or a longer cycle, 400-year grand solar minimum cycle, 220,000 year magnetic reversal cycle, whatever, you can, smaller, larger. Something is absolutely going on where it needs to be sped up, and it's like breakneck speed. Doesn't even matter if they see there's going to be so blindsided by so much information coming out, so much scare that they won't even see it. Because I'm not sure about that nuclear scare, because, you got to think about the Cuban Missile Crisis and stuff. We look back at it now as like, okay, they said don't do it, whatever, and you didn't get the fear, right? They were doing radio broadcasting messages every second, and the carrier fleet and the destroyers are there, just like this, and you're just waiting on the edge of your seat for something to collide, and then you see the missiles in air already. Like back then, it was just terrifying, so it didn't happen. So when you say it's at the cuspity cusp, I don't know. Are we really at the cusp of that? I don't know. And if you had the pills or whatever, if they were throwing off nuclear exchange and I was close enough to that thing to need those pills, I'd just be like, whatever, I'm just going to live the rest of my life. That's it. Like if the world gets that bizarre, you're just going to have to take it as you were in that place at that time. People die every day, wrong place, wrong time. People have miraculous stories of escaping death by 1/5 of 1/8 of an inch. Wasn't your time to go. You look at it in a wider sense like that. So at that point, the world had truly gone insane. If you're actually in the area that would be so contaminated that you would need iodine pills, and they went to that level, and you're actually experiencing that fallout, at that point, the world has literally gone insane, and everything that would you even want to just grow my veggies, turn everything off, and I'll see you on the other side. Because I don't know if they would actually take it to that level. Because here's the thing about a nuclear exchange: hope is given up on the globe at the same time for everything at that point. I don't care what continent you're in, what religion you are, whatever strata of income you might be, or whatever, it doesn't matter. Everybody will have that same reaction of, well, why should I even invest in my 401k? It's all done. And everybody's going to have that same exact thing of not all faith in all system will collapse on the same day. So if you're looking at systems, the reason they're still in place is because people believe in them. Now, if you need to usher in a new digital currency and a new central bank digital currency and an entirely new economic system and make the old one go away completely, then that would be in the playbook. Because you see how I was just talking about the hope. Oh, we got to go to a new system. The old one doesn't work. Okay. Everybody would accept it because it'd be such a, beyond a 10 sigma, 50 sigma event of like a nuclear exchange, come multiple cities and all these kind of carnage and things you'd see. At that point, financial systems literally would lock up and not work a second after that. Knowing that, people would be like frightened, and then suddenly everything locks up and all their banking, every bank froze, every bank bailed in, can't get to your safety deposit boxes, no ATMs, can't use your credit cards, nothing across the entire planet, everywhere. Because for sure a couple of those nukes that were going off, if they did, they'd have an EMP with them that would blow off some things. So if you were at a juncture point where undersea cables met above ground satellites that met an electrical station and all conduits flowed from that one specific destination, you could knock out an enormous amount of stuff. So nothing would work from that point forward. Literally nothing that financially would work from that point forward, except the physical gold and silver in your hand, or whatever you got to trade. How many nails, man? But to bring in a new system, that's what would be required, and that's the scary part. But going back to that scare factor, yeah, they can milk that for a while. But I mean, after you've been through the COVID thing, is a nuclear exchange between whatever in a couple cities, is that scarier than getting locked down for 2 years, realizing that it was all fake at the end of it? I don't know. Are we under the desks again? I mean, run upstairs and get your peanut butter and jelly sandwich, Ransom. We're going to get locked in our nuclear bunkers. Don't forget the PB&Js. Like what, Insanity pervades our world. Truly it does. Truly it does.
It kind of makes you wonder if with watching what's going on in Bangladesh, that's 140 million people out of power. Mystery, they say, power grid collapse. That
140 million. What did it get that big?
Yeah, that's what it says. A total of 41 million people plunged into darkness in the world's biggest blackout. Massive power outage in Bangladesh. But you were just talking about EMPs. Really, they don't have to do anything but set off a couple of small yield nuclear weapons to put in a perpetual state of fear around the world and a reason for lockdowns. They don't actually have to go to a full-blown, mutually assured destruction, war. And then think about that. You said something to me last week, and I had to go find the article again about the best by dates on the foods. Now, I don't know how many times you've seen a nuclear movie about that, and you see all these people, and they're scrounging around fighting over cans of food that may or may not be good, and we've talked about that many times. And it's funny that they would do that. I mean, why would they do that? Is that just so that you don't know you're eating rotten food, or is it so that some kind of event can happen where they could just tell you, hey, don't eat any of that food. We can't guarantee it. It's, it may be contaminated or old. But you need to come to the center. We got Wi-Fi, and if you got a good enough credit score, you can come in and, it's exactly the same playbook as the pandemic. What they did to them, they locked down, they locked people up. They made you cover your face like a prisoner, and then if you did what you were supposed to, and you went and took their gift, you got to go to the movies, you got to go to the grocery store, and Australia is maybe even a better example of how things can turn fast. Because not too long ago, most people think of Australia as a pretty free, independent nation, and that it was very similar to the United States. And then, a rash of kind of leftist ideas took over. They limited their guns, they did other things, and then it led them to the point where they had people in camps. I mean, it's hard for me to, let that go. Other people seem to, oh, that's no big deal. It was just, they weren't killing them or nothing. But what was the next step if something different happened? What if they decided that a certain group of people were a danger to the entire world under this lockdown system? It wouldn't be hard to find them with this kind of credit score tracking and tracing of all of the food products. And then that whole idea that I think they pushed that Best Buy date thing out there just so that it's one more little idea on top of the consumer where they feel the fear of food insecurity. And then anytime, you pull distribution out, people will lose their mind. And we already know that they do that. And I think that's the bigger overall plan, not to destroy the world. It's all a reset. So keep that in mind. But I've talked about this before. In order to reset any machine or any, computer or program or anything like that, you must turn it off for a little while. Therefore, you can re-upload all the updates. Anybody that messes with the computer, that it's different. A new program, a new control system has been put in the system when it reboots. So it's not the same thing at all as before the reset. So that's what we're about to look at here. And it's not about to. We're well in it. I don't know how people are, kind of kidding themselves. Let's take electric cars, for example. In Florida, there's been all kinds of, we talked about this the other day with the robots, about what happens to the batteries in the systems when they malfunction. Well, they blow up and they start fires. And here's a article from Fox: electric vehicles are exploding from water damage after Hurricane Ian, Florida official warned. So they're having all of these random fires out there. And then we know, just from looking into it not too hard, that the whole idea of everyone driving an electric car is preposterous. There's no way to build the batteries. They don't have the material. They don't have the infrastructure to produce billions of vehicles for people. There's just no way. So it's obviously some kind of a scam. And it's a big scam. Even after 100 billion, self-driving cars aren't going anywhere. This is an article out of Bloomberg where they kind of halfway tell the truth. It's just implausible for that to be happening. So it's not going to be a wonderful, George Jetson future with your nice little flying car and all of that stuff. They have a totally different version of the way humans are going to be living their lives. And that involves every decision that you make in your life, having Big Brother look over you and judge you, and it all going into a computer system. And, the people kind of first woke up to this with Edward Snowden, but then they blew it off. It became commonplace. Everybody says, I know that, whatever, I'm not doing anything wrong. But when you see it used in this new way that they're going to use it here and everywhere, they're already doing it in China, is a pre-crime style thing where they're just using your emotions, opinions. And if you guys haven't been paying attention, Germany, England, France, all kinds of different places throughout Europe, you can include China, Australia, they're all arresting people for opinions, for thoughts already. It's already happening. It's not a conspiracy theory. You can find it. They're making laws everywhere. First, they start with words that are offensive, but then it's ideas that are disruptive. And then pretty much, we get cycled back to the position in time where there are people destroying your access to information, your ability to grow your own food, and basically your freedom to roam the planet. That's the spot we're in. People don't see it. I try to look at it in a good way because I feel like I'm smart enough I could still navigate it. at least through the rest of my life. But what about my children's lives and the lives of my grandchildren and on and on? Which means that there is no time like the present to say no to all of these ideas. No to the war, no to the control systems, no to the restrictions, mandates, regulations, all of it. It was going to happen eventually, but I think that the government, the world government or governmental system is pushing it sooner than it was going to happen naturally. And what I mean by that is they've made so many laws, so many regulations that they've completely crippled the ability of human beings to function on this planet. So it would have to necessarily be reset because the system is no longer working, and it's like a secret that the people didn't know that the system was designed for this exact collapse. So that's my opinion. And you were saying that a minute ago. It seems like it's all planned. Well, we know it's all planned because they keep bragging about it. They keep writing books about it. They keep pushing new ideas in predictive programming, and then they slowly get you used to it. But recently, they're not moving slow anymore. This is it. This is the reset. And I forgot what they were naming this next year in the financial market. I'll find the article when I go back to you. But basically, this, in their own words, this is the year of hell. And it makes you wonder, is this the dark winter we were all promised? Or were these all predictive programming phrases for what they're doing right now? Because it seems like they're pushing the button on a complete economic collapse, including what a lot of people around the world cling to, which is the petrodollar. And I've seen a lot of turmoil with the OPEC arrangements and new countries aligning with deals. So you can see that that's going to have a lot of trouble in the near future. And I would predict also that right after the midterms here in November, right about Christmas time, when everybody goes everywhere, you'll see all of the petroleum prices skyrocket and some kind of new war emergency or pandemic. That'll be the spot that they're going to do it because they're priming the public for it now.
So what's after the dark winter should be the question. So everybody's pretty familiar with the dark winter scenarios from the World Economic Forum, but what are they really pushing after that? Like, what's the next big thing? So they brought everybody to the trough on the COVID thing, and now the dark winter as being the food game that they had done also on world famines and how they were going to control the world food supply under one direct control, and then digitize that as proof of ownership of it. And then they would set up distribution places where you'd be able to come with your digitized, pound of rice or whatever and swipe your code and then get that. Or if you were transferring a large amount of it and you didn't have a way to carry it, you could digitize that contract that you'd paid for this much over there. And when you get to the other spot, you just swipe the code and then they give you 200 tons of rice. That was what the whole food game was about. Was after the global famines come in, they're going to have to consolidate all control over all food. And it'll all be track and traced, all on the blockchain, all facilitated by using QR codes on phones, which is why Africa is giving away. How many telephones have they given away in Africa? Enough to carry the 4G signal around. I think they've given like 20 million phones away across Africa just for free in all these nations. Now you can't say you don't have the QR code. Like, they're giving everybody a device. Then that's like giving everybody a driver's license, or everybody has to have an ID, right? Like, you might look at that and go, no, I don't have to carry a phone. But, in the world today, almost everybody is with an ID. Remember those days? Where's your ID? Try to fly an airplane without an ID and then see how far it gets you. So, why is it moving so quickly is the question. What's the next big thing planned after dark winter? Maybe the food game, and maybe the dark winter tails into the food reaction game or food reaction chain, I think is the article. Did a story on it many moons ago. That was years ago, like years, plural ago. But then you look at some of these things starting to happen now, like they truly were planned years ago. But is it this liquefaction event coming up in October of 2024 that's really creating the push? Like, what's really happening if you stand and you just analyze, just sit back under a tree, like literally sit back under a tree, just kind of analyze what's going on around the world. Don't be part of it. Just step back as an observer and just look at the whole thing as an ecosystem in itself, like a web of life, for a better term, within the world that's been crafted as reality for a majority of the people. Like, what's going on inside there, and what's the reasoning behind? They're masking something. Something's being masked through distraction, is what I see. A desired effect of total distraction for the entire populace of the planet, while this group of people over here, a little tiny group on the left, just scurries around unseen, doing whatever, last minute preparations, last minute geoengineering, last minute resource pillaging. Consolidating markets into a single monopoly. I don't know. But whatever it is, these are distractions against the inbound events that we're going to see celestially. And might I add, back on the terrestrial plane here in our world. Okay, so to stop inflation protests, this is off Zero Hedge too. I like that site. This is the second time. You had a Zero Hedge article too. I got this one. Panama fixes prices of groceries and medicine because of mass protests. Now, fixes here means capping, fixed price or fixed price. So the Panamanian government announced it's going to exert control over the prices of 72 food items, meaning price control. Can't sell it for any more than this. And then they're going to impose price caps on 150 medicines. Same dealio. You can't go over this dollar amount. It's capped. Well, they're doing the same thing in Europe. They're trying to nationalize all means of production and storage in Europe as we speak. The EU, those 27 countries are trying to come to an agreement that there's not enough natural gas. There sure won't be enough any kind of chemical production going on, because you need the actual physical natural gas to break apart the carbon and then the hydrogen and then recombine those atoms to whatever short chain or long chain that you would like out of that hydrocarbon to create something like plastic or fertilizers or solvents. I don't know. There's a lot of things they do. Electrofuels, by the way. And see, that's another lie that we need to talk about. Remember, I'll forget about electrofuels, so please, Ransom, bring it back. I'll even try to write a note here. But they have no, and I'm going to say they're going to be below 50%, way below 50%. They're only relying on their stores, not what would also be coming in at the time. So they're probably going to hit about 50% of the actual need of natural gas of what they're getting. So all smelters have stopped in Europe, all of them. The ones that are doing steel smelters, copper, because they go from the ingots and into the rods, and they, after it's processed, then they takes different forms on how you want to ship it and sell it. So copper's off. Got zinc and aluminum also shut down. This thing takes months, plural, to bring them back online after they shut down. And then anything that's chemical, because A, they don't have the electricity to run the factories to get the heat or electromagnetism to break molecular bonds of these carbon or the CH4, the methane atoms. You got to have the gas too. You got to have the physical gas to do anything with the hydrocarbons on that. Plus, you need the electricity. You need both. Like, you just can't make fuel out of air. You got to have some input into it. Electricity is not input. Electricity is electricity. I guess you could do electrolysis would be the best way. Add water, throw some current into it, and then boom, you can separate the oxygen and hydrogen and burn both. All right, I misspoke. Okay, electricity is an ingredient in that. Otherwise, look at all that's gone down. All the fertilizer producers have gone down. Price capping, by the way. Any kind of base metals, price capped. And what they want to do in the EU is one unelected body wants to take all control of all manufacturing and all storage and all supply chain across Europe under one tiny little group of five or so whatever sitting at the top saying, we will do this. Everybody shall share. So they were also trying to include the rights that if I had a warehouse full of copper and I couldn't manufacture because I'm shut down and everything, they can come and take the copper and then take it to another place that was in a manufacturing process. So they can literally abscond and steal your goods to take it out of a warehouse to another place. They price capped everything, and they're still in the process of doing the same thing across all of Europe. So if you're talking about it going on a global basis here, so we got 27 countries over in Europe, price fixing. I know there was some, Argentina was having problems. Where else down there? Colombia was having problems. And now Panama fixing prices of groceries. So that's already like at 30 countries already. I think there's like between 198 and 202 countries in the world. I know it changes every year. Things break away, new, some consolidate. But then you're getting above 10% of the entire planet. And at what point does it swing over where it's like then 20% of the planet? Because I'll add one last thing here, Ransom. I had done a show on this over on Mike Adams' channel at Brighteon TV. The valuation of how you value a company in the stock market and how that's worth something that people want to trade will need to cease at the end of this year. The main, if they're a 100% European listed company like BASF, for example, although they have subsidiaries all around the world, they can't give the value to a company because, like, for example, BASF has been and had a continuous factory running, never even a day of shutting down since 1952. That area has expanded to 10 square kilometers or 6 square miles of factory for BASF. They say they don't even waste one molecule of gas in their processes. That has to be taken to zero, and then you need to revalue the rest of the company with that, the main offices, all the main production, that all needs to go to zero, and then you're still supposed to value the company at the same as it was. So see, there's another leg that comes out of the financial markets because they can't give a value to all these companies that are on the Fortune 500 or wherever they're listed out of Europe. That becomes a huge problem on how is anything worth anything. And see, that goes right back into they could price fix everything, and then you'll know exactly how much everything will be costing because it's all price fixed. But Ransom, you need the problem first to then create the solution. What dialectic is that? I forgot. Back to the apple schnapps. It's a festive time in Tennessee.
Well, I think it's pretty obvious the event that they're doing is depopulation. It's just coming in waves. They've been pushing this idea so long that there's some really bizarre things going on right now. I know you remember a few years ago in China, there was a big deal about allegedly vans that would go around and fix the number of your family if you decided to go over the limit there. But now we have that same thing here. People just don't realize that it's the same thing. And then you got all of these social justice and social engineering campaigns going on, kind of telling people that they shouldn't have kids, and it's cool not to, and you don't want to, that's a whole topic by itself. But people forget that there's so much propaganda out there trying to switch them from the nuclear family idea and having a successful home and maybe growing food and being self-sufficient, that whole kind of connection to earth idea of being a human being. And then you got these articles like this where AI expert predicts that virtual children will become the norm in the next 50 years. So the metaverse is where you'll find for the people that are, in 2050. So they are planning on a future. It's not like they're trying to make it where there's just no future. They want a future. It's just a very depopulated, controlled version of that. And this is okay. So Planned Parenthood plans mobile. That means they're going in RVs and stuff, and they're moving around town. So you can think what you want about that, but I just wanted to remind people that the Congress of the United States had hearings about how horrible it was that people in another country were being forced to do that exact same thing, and they were bringing up, the Nuremberg trials and all of these things, and it's all an official, in our government, that we recognize that the Chinese were just horrible people for doing something that's advertised over here as just a good thing. It's a right. It's what you need to be doing. So the whole culture is going towards a lower population. And when you really get into the study of population, you realize that it is not going to keep skyrocketing. They already have a mathematical formula where they know that a certain amount of, somebody even put it in a good way the other day. They were talking about, I think it was Elon Musk, matter of fact, and he was talking about that there's this ratio out there that when a country has more old people diapers than it does baby diapers, that's the collapse of their population. It's at that time they know the population is about to disappear because there's more elderly people at the very end of their life than there are people being born. And we start finding this pattern in real life. So it's happening around the world. We know that the population is going to plateau and then drop off. And this is excluding any other factors like possible sterilants or people being, for whatever reason, they're infertile. That doesn't put in, it doesn't factor in new social trends like in Japan, where a lot of the young men are not interested in women because the way that their culture's gone. They go to work, they drink, they go to work, they drink, they go to work, they drink. They hang out mostly all with, if they have a good job, with the corporation and the bosses and the other people that are there. So they're in their culture, a lot of that age group thinks that they needed to be busy and not even be interested in what a normal human being should be. And this is leading to a population plateau. And if you knew that that plateau was going to happen at a specific time frame, and you also knew that there were going to be maybe magnetic and cosmic ray changes at the same time, and maybe a real climate change because of the cycle that we're going to go in, then you could start these think tanks up that make these programs that help push that population number even lower. I don't know, by wars or, chemicals, forever chemicals in the soil. Matter of fact, I have an article right here talking about one of the leading causes they believe is the reason everybody's going infertile and can't have children is because the number of forever chemicals in their soil, which happens to be also in the organic soils that they're selling from the stores. And recently, I think it was Chicago, had free organic soil for everybody to come get, and they were pushing it, and they knew all a certain demographic of people that wants to live clean and thinks that they're doing, steps to make themselves self-sufficient, couldn't pass up a free deal on organic soil. So they told them, come on down, get it. And then it turns out it was completely saturated with fire retardants and forever chemicals. So basically, it was completely disgusting soil. And there's been a number of times in which Chinese companies have gotten in trouble for selling food to the United States that was tainted with some kind of heavy metal or something like that that's not good, a carcinogen. And, they didn't get in trouble. And the reason is because the organic farming method is a defined method of farming, which just means that you put a seed in the ground and you don't add any chemicals to it and you let it grow naturally the way it's going to. It has nothing to do with how contaminated the soil is or how depleted the soil is. So you just think about these waves and layers of these different programs that are all meant for depopulation. I mean, there's only one way to look at that. If the cultural ideas are going in the way of children are bad, and then at the same time, you're having real world child production problems, which I guess that puts a certain demographic of people that have kept their life clean, relatively speaking, and have been secluded and already self-sufficient for a number of decades before this plateau happens. They might be able to, take the hit. And that looks like that world that we talked about, where there's a breakaway technocratic civilization that can kind of just go hide in a hole in their luxury resort bunkers and wait out the fall of civilization, and then come out at the other end as the answer, the people with the tech, the people, to get government back in order, to protect everybody, because it'll be a lot smaller population, much easier to control. with their new AI systems and government control mechanisms that they've been beta testing on us the last couple of years and really decades.
The petri dish called Earth. My whole thing is about when you were talking, do chickens need heat lamps? Because you sent me that article, planetary scale heat wave discovered on and in Jupiter's atmosphere. Digging into this article, is very much so. Like, heat is needed. Things are getting cooler. I'm watching New Zealand get smashed by the coldest and snowiest, what would be late coming into the spring. Well, I should say mid-spring. The deepest snows and the coldest temperatures they've had in over 50 years. At the same time, everybody, well, it's the third La Nina. And here's the thing that goes along with Jupiter. Normally, a La Nina signals when you're coming to the end of the 11.8-year solar cycle. Now, on average, you're talking above 90% when our sun declines and it heads into solar minimum, not solar maximum. We're heading to solar maximum now. It's not going to be where the forecasts were, although they might chime and scream to the hallelujah that it will be. It ain't yet. Fat lady ain't sung. We got to hold off on the predictions and see what happens. But when it comes down on the backside, La Nina, solar minimum. This is the thing. It's the third consecutive La Nina that's happening right now that it probably won't let off with the cold water in the Pacific until March or even middle of April of next year for the forecast, at least what they say. The third La Nina in a row being that intense is super, super incredibly rare. 2 in a row, that's like, wow, that's pretty heavy and extreme. But 3 in a row, they're like, whoa, what's going on? Well, if you're coming into a 400-year solar minimum, then you're going to start to get into way longer sets of La Ninas, and that's electromagnetic in effect. Definitely some charge equilibrium or possibilities between those two. The planetary scale heat wave, Jupiter's atmosphere jumping 700 degrees Celsius and extending 130,000 kilometers, which is what, 80,000 miles. And somehow we're supposed to believe that Earth is going to sit here unaffected by this when the upper atmosphere, and then all these, think about it, the upper atmosphere of Jupiter starts to expand and it's moving faster. So the more input into a system, the faster it moves. The faster it moves creates light. The faster it vibrates, the more luminous it is. When you start look at planetary luminosity and you're looking at Jupiter swinging by here, remember over these last 2 to 3 weeks, how many stories have there been about Jupiter's going to be the brightest in the sky? It's been in 20 years. Look how bright Jupiter is. Look at Jupiter's so big you can almost reach out and touch it. Well, you can. Yeah. What came first, the chicken or the realization of the big egg up there growing in size, and they have to explain it away? You don't have to go very much further back than the Romans and the Greeks to understand Zeus and Apollo and gods of old with thunderbolts from the sky. Those planets at that time were way brighter than they are now and much larger and took up a huge proportion of the sky in comparison to today. We're like little tiny pinprick dots up there. No, these things were like the masters flying through the heavens. And then that same giant comes back to life again. At the same time, we're heading into the triple La Nina. We're coming into the volcanic winter in the southern hemisphere. All these changes on the planet are happening to mask this. Maybe I just answered my own question because I asked you, what's the distraction masking? It's masking these natural changes. Like our society and civilization will not be able to last at its present form the way it does moving through this. So many things are going to change, from the crust of our planet pulling and rifting and breaking a huge amount of infrastructure, railroads, bridges, highways, etc., pipelines. I mean, the food production is going to go way back local again. They'll be like west of the Mississippi, east of the Mississippi. But Jupiter's atmosphere heating and all these strange anomalies are definitely pointing to something electromagnetic happening to our star. Like the sun itself has changed, in the process of changing, morphing. And you can see the general trend of where it's going to go. Magnetic fields are going to go out of alignment on the sun. They're going to cancel each other out completely in 2024. So as the magnetic fields start to cancel themselves out, to when you come to what? The sun with a zero magnetic field. Imagine something like that. The sun with a zero magnetic field for even an instant of time, seconds at best. What would that do to our own Earth here? What would it do to Jupiter, for example? Well, that magnetism would travel across and start hitting Jupiter far more. You know, the plasma flow in that double wrapping field aligned current still flows through our solar system, but if it can't be uptaken by the sun, it's going to find a flow through here, and it's going to probably go to Jupiter or Saturn and hit those two and make them glow. Bigger, brighter, way noticeable, super scary for humans on the planet, kind of scary. Like you look at Jupiter and you can see it, it's pretty bright, but what if you wake up tomorrow and really it's 50 or 100 times bigger in the sky? And it's way bright, and you're like a very dull sun going through the sky every evening. That is a civilization ending, economy ending, nobody cares about anything anymore realization moment on the planet. Like, how close are we really getting to that? Well, I'm saying October of 2024 is when we're going to be there. So we got 2 years left, literally. So I was thinking that the changes would be, I don't know what I was thinking, you know, because I put these forecasts together after seeing Valentina Zarkova's models and looking into an enormous amount of others and talking with Piers Corbin and doing all these assessments, John Casey and thing. And I like, is it really going from 2015 linear straight up and then we're going to get that canceling? Or like, when those double overlapping waves were coming that Valentina had mapped out, they crisscrossed right here in 2023 before the field was going to go into the flip and then completely cancel itself. That's on the sun. So we're at that crossover point right now. So what happens when magnetic fields start going to zero on the sun as they start to move into that position right now? The first layer will cancel, and then the deeper second layer will cancel in 2024. Then we'll come into that really zero magnetic field state, which I talk about the looping toroid magnetic fields and the block wall. And you know, Ransom, I'm going to come back to it. Remember when you were talking about gravitational bursts, and if you could jump into that magnetic field or have a family born in a low magnetic field period, i.e. low sunspot count solar minimums, your lifetime would be expanded. Now, what if you could map out this block wall here and you could figure out pretty closely within days or within a month of when that canceling magnetic field would happen on the sun that would cause that zero magnetic field around our planet for just a short amount of time? You know, something's going on here way deeper than, you know, it's an economic crisis there. Okay, there could be a nuke there. They turned off the natural gas there. That is truly nothing in comparison to what I'm talking about with these magnetic canceling waves on the sun affecting our planet itself. Our magnetic fields are behaving strangely too. They're starting to wander. The South Atlantic anomaly connecting with the Van Allen radiation belts is getting super energized, which would explain also why Jupiter is starting to get more energized. The whole system's getting more energized. And for sure, our planting and harvesting dates are going to go way out of whack this year. And they're predicting everywhere else from the Old Farmer's Almanac, if you believe in looking at caterpillars, if there's more black instead of orange, it's going to be a dark or a deeper winter, or the amount of acorns that trees drop, or how many days of fog in your valley in July and August, if that determines, looking at old timer knowledge, they all say it's going to be cold this winter. And now we got a lot of European and U.S. Weather forecasting agencies saying it's going to be brutally cold. That tongue of cold is going to come and lick you. Ransom, I've been rambling for a little bit, man. Just take us into the break here. That heat wave article, I think I got stuck on that one. Sometimes I babble when I get into those deeper thoughts.
Yeah, it's great. we talked about that birth thing, and if you think about it, the last couple of years, really low sunspots. A lot of babies were probably born in that little period. But yeah, if you were waiting for a specific time, it would be coming up for these elite families.
That sun out was better than an impact that killed the dinosaurs. We'll be right back. After the short break here, freedomslips.com, Revolution Radio, David Dubine, Ransom Godwin, Studio A, 10 p.m. to midnight.
You're listening to Revolution
See you
Radio
in the second hour.
freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
What would it feel like to have your health and wellness in balance?
All disease is simply the improper replication of the DNA molecule. FCE, full chronic extract, when you grow the plant indoors with no contaminants, and then you get 120 cannabinoids, what that does for your telomeres and for your DNA is incredible. It is absolutely the best as far as being able to get your health back. A good phrase would be is there's no such thing as disease, just a lack of a good immune system. So if you can enhance your immune system, this is definitely the best way to do so. It's definitely the best thing from an immune system standpoint. If you take the position of, I just want to enhance my immune system, 120 cannabinoids is done through what's called the entourage and full plant extract compared to others that are out there and no contaminants. That's what's huge. So there's been tens of millions of dollars put into this, and many people have had benefits from it type stuff. So this is about full spectrum and being able to get the entire benefit from the plant. This is the first time ever with a patented process to actually do that. If you take iron supplements, there's 4 different types of iron, and then the challenge is you have to have stuff that goes with it so the body will absorb it.
So this is a lot like when you take vitamin D so you can absorb the other vitamins. You kind of need the full spectrum of vitamins to get the benefit of each individual one.
Absolutely. And the thing that people notice the most is sleep. They have really, really deep sleep, and they sleep extremely well. And if they stop taking the product, then immediately their sleep is disrupted again. This is something that the Chinese and Egyptians and so on and so forth. So the research is more than just recent. It's extensive. So full plant extract, it's done indoors, aeroponics. Once you've got that, then you can get the full spectrum. People find that it resets their metabolism. So there'll be a lot of things that they're eating now, including sugar. It'll make it so that you will not desire to be able to consume the things that you're having challenges with. So wheat, dairy, sugar, all these different things. It'll balance your system so that it'll get you to the point where your metabolism is correct, and your palate, what you desire to eat, will change drastically.
The entourage effect is a proposed mechanism by which all the cannabis compounds interact exponentially in a synergistic manner to modulate the overall effects of the plant. The benefit of the entourage effect is the increase of the therapeutic experience. More compounds consumed in whole plant medicine typically means a higher likelihood of pain relief, anti-inflammatory action, anxiety relief, just to name a few. The endocannabinoid system, ECS, which is now being recognized as arguably the most important system in the human body, since it provides some degree of master control over all the other systems. In short, the ECS helps to balance many of our physiological systems and supports the body. The fact is, the ECS impacts just about everything, including appetite, immune response, calorie burn, pain and inflammation, and even cellular health. Its most important overall function is homeostasis, which basically means that it helps to keep the body in a healthy balance.
the changes coming up in the food pricing and the inavailability of medicines because China has shut off the spigot for base chemical materials to produce our antibiotics, a lot of things are going to shift. And having something that's produced in the United States that seems it covers two different arenas, something that's going to happen with your body because your food choices are going to change. And at the same time, if you're unable to get whatever medicines there are out there, there could be a substitute on a supplement or something more natural side versus the chemical side. And welcome back for the second hour of Mini Ice Age Conversations. I'm David Dubine right here along with Ransom Godwin. How's the world spinning? It's more about what are the distractions that we're seeing for the present world we're living in. The distractions are here, you can name them. There are endless distractions out there in the news cycle, but to distract away from what? That's what we were talking about before the break. Changes in the solar system electromagnetically, consciousness rising out of changes in the magnetic field on our planet, the inability to grow food, jet streams and cloud cells moving where governments couldn't grow enough food for their citizens. I mean, just look for your own chapter of history that we're about to repeat. And if you think this type of information is valuable to listen to, is some of the reasoning behind the events on our planet. Nothing personal. It's just a petri dish. It's the way that we're being looked at, almost experimented on. Because Ransom was talking about the mind control of the controllers putting out things and saying that they'll do this and try this, and the PP that was out there, the predictive programming, all showing you agendas that were coming. Is it is it really just a petri dish, just an experiment on humanity to see what can be done or what not can be done? I mean, it seems that the human resonance can be used, hijacked, twisted, and directed for the outcome for someone else to build the reality for that someone else, using the human mind and creativity to build that, think it, create it for that entity. You could take it a million different directions. Truly, is a supply chain breaking down because we don't have enough natural gas, or is it because Jupiter's atmosphere heated 700 degrees Celsius, which is 1,270 degrees Fahrenheit, and the atmosphere expanded 80,000 miles, and the planet's much brighter in the sky over the last, months? That's something to distract away from. You're going to need some very big events on Earth to distract away from that. As we go deeper into the conversation, sometimes when you're starting to connect all these seemingly disconnected dots into a wider picture, once you start to get that picture, people don't want you talking about it very much. So if you consider free speech the origination point of all 8 streams tonight, right here, Revolution Radio Studio A, please consider a donation. Patreon, donor box, cryptocurrency, direct payment. Help keep shows on just like this, the ones you love to hear, not even mine. If it's another show that you love, then that's worth it to keep the entire network on the air because it provides you value from that one show. Support the host having the production capabilities and people online at all times to keep this information flow moving. Ransom, data jockey, with me here tonight. So I wanted to mention, something about Florida quick, the phosphorus mines down there, Mosaic, talking last hour about the plant shutdowns across Europe. There's going to be very little fertilizer production coming out of Europe. Very little. I mean, very, very, very almost to the point of zero little coming out, and pesticides, herbicides, and fungicides. And now that whole mine area got flooded to the point where they're using pumps to try to get water out of the mines. I imagine later they can dig back in there and take out what has been re-wetted, for a better term, and then bring it up and somehow solar dehydrate that and then finally come to a dry layer again and continue operations. But that's the largest. They provide 50%, 50% of the fertilizers utilized in America for phosphorus. Now that's offline currently, so everywhere you look, there's something chipping away. And Ransom, I'd like to get your thought on this. I wrote a note to myself, and I was looking through that on the break there. The Australians always seem super rough and tumble, like super rough, and they're like, put another shrimp on the Barbie. They're out there, like the imagination of what the Crocodile Dundee movie series did for Americans to, snap their minds into Australians are super wild, super rough, rumble, rugby, clashing. Surfers on the beach, is very free, very, super buff, and like everybody got taken over so quick, they were put in camps and nobody resisted a single thing. That's what I mean by this mind twist that's being thrown at us again and again, century after century. It seems like the same controllers are in power, regardless of we're at this minute now, this decade, or this century, or even a full millennia, but they've been seemingly here since the Sumerians, so I don't know what's going to change in these next few years. Something's terrifying. That change of vibrational frequency of the last 7,000 years is about to change, where whatever was here holding state, controlling humanity, is about to lose that frequency edge, and we're going to either see it for what it is truly, or we're going to break out of it, above it, where it will be like in a hot air balloon looking down as we continue to rise up. Anyway, thanks again for joining for the second hour, Ransom.
Yeah, that thing in Australia really kind of is a mind blower because, like you said, there is this kind of stereotype about Australians being these super tough people, really, from a prison colony, and they're rough and rugged. And that is true. The problem is that they didn't know they were being attacked, in my opinion. I think everybody, for the most part, wanted to be good citizens and, cooperate, thinking and listening. And of course, there was a degree of fear in their decision making. But all of these things that set up the power to do that were incrementalized in their country. And, I've had a chance to actually hang out with some Australian military people. And, they are they're our cousins. I mean, they're a lot like Americans in a way. But they were sold the same bill of goods that the whole world was. And for me, I can't even still to this day wrap my head around if all of these countries around the world have different alliances and are mistrusting of the other countries. How, for the first time in my knowledge, world history, did all of the countries in unison take the same steps to a perceived emergency? Was it because they didn't want to get left out? I doubt that, because, in any group of people, there's always one person that will scratch the surface of a narrative and find out what's true or not, and they'll be saying that. I mean, that just happens. So it's hard for me to imagine that all of the world's countries in unison agreed on a topic like they might in the future if there was a world governance. But, I've hung out with Australian people that they do a lot of drinking. I'm not saying every alcoholic's a drunk, but they can put any alcoholic in America to shame with drinking. And I mean, like, because I got to go to their embassy.
I know. Hey, Ransom, I know some dudes from New Zealand like that too. That would absolutely shred anybody here, man. Like, seriously.
Yeah, it's no competition. I mean, they were, when they bring you drinks, it's like 3 at a time, so you don't have to go back and bug the drink server. I got to drink with them, and they were all military people, and they were split down the middle on their kind of political personalities. And it was just like here. There was a obvious left and right with people's opinions on stuff. Some were for controlling guns. Some think that everybody should have guns, like and down the middle. And it was easy for the world governments to kind of, coax people into a trusting situation there. And I think they will rebel later. Maybe if it happens again, I would hope so. I would hope the entire world would. But for some reason, I think that we've been beat down incrementally so much that it's not a question of, fighting them. People don't know that they're under attack. They really just don't believe that. They think that everything's, trying to work for their benefit and that's just not the case. It never has been. I don't know how they would be lulled into that situation, but it seems to have happened all around the world. And it took a couple of years for people to really start listening to the questions that were out there. And meanwhile, the governments of the world have been doing all kinds of stuff, setting up for the next round of things, which I believe is going to be a lot darker, and it's going to happen a lot faster. And when you look back at different campaigns and propaganda strategies, they usually take about a decade to take effect. So you can just imagine what we're going to be like as far as bowing down to authoritarianism in the name of safety and security by 2030. And especially if you throw into the mix war, famine, and more pandemic, you get the people into a sheep-like state after a while, where they'll fight little battles, but never the big ones, because it just seems too big for them to deal with. And I beg to differ. I think that if every person took it upon themselves to argue each fight that doesn't make sense in their local area, I mean, like all of them, even with, when this pandemic started and everybody started putting on the face divers, I refused. I'm one of those weird people in the U.S. that I just said, nope, I didn't do it. I continued to travel. I continued to live out my life. And it was so weird and bizarre knowing that I was a standout person. Everybody was now looking at me. And it reminded me of, any number of weird sci-fis like Invasion of the Body Snatcher. It felt like, any minute they were going to start screeching at me, just like in that movie. And in fact, we saw lots of viral videos of exactly that. Different Karens from different places that took it upon themselves to protect the system that they felt like was being attacked by you being a nonconformist. So if you fast forward that into a situation where only certain people have bothered to collect seeds, and get their life in order in a way that they predict that there may be hardships in the future of different kinds. Maybe the world's not going to end in an Armageddon, which I really doubt it will. It'll just be so incremental that people are forced to deal with it at each little tiny problem at a time, to where it's like the straw that broke the camel's back. Before they have no rights at all and no decision-making capabilities, because there are no options and they've been cornered off. And like I've said before, you can't, kind of escape if you don't even see the bars. And a lot of people don't see the bars. They feel like these authoritarian things and somehow are helping them. And this groupthink necessarily, just in a natural course of evolution, seems like it would become more entrenched in a technological populace when people are glued to their robots or androids, whatever you want to call them, all the time, looking for feedback from the populace, in which we used to look for feedback from our local area populace, our actual peers, like family, friends, maybe you're part of a church or some kind of group like, they used to have all of these different groups that would provide charity to different stuff. They got the Kiwanis Club and, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But people had a sense of community. And when bad times came, it wasn't very hard for Americans to pull together and take care of a problem. It happened over and over again. You see it nowadays with these hurricanes. There's so many people willing to help that there's overwhelming amount of empathy. And not only when it happens in the U.S., but when it happens overseas. And that exact human nature is what they take advantage of, to take our money and put it in wars and different things, and then threaten us with climate change, that this disaster is going to happen. You've seen the propaganda trying to push off the idea that hurricanes are somehow worse or bad. More bad than, that's not even a word. They're a lot worse than they've ever been. And that's just complete, utter nonsense. We know there have been giant storms in the past, things that have pushed sand from the Gulf of Mexico all the way up in the Ohio River Valley, things like that. So we're not even seeing super storms like they're saying yeah, it might be bad. And I got a question kind of connected to this Florida thing. You were talking about these different ingredients for different stuff to make stuff, fungus and different stuff. What do you think the outlook on vitamin C is in the next year? Just simply from the fact I know they don't make it exactly like that, but a lot of people like oranges and orange juice, and that is their supply of vitamin C that they get. What do you think is going to happen to all of those fields of agriculture that just got wiped out? The infrastructure for their local farm got wiped out. It either got flooded, blown away, etc. Their barns gone. Insurance is going to cover that for some people. But other people can't, afford to operate and pay insurance every year, or they might not have done it, and they're just gone. So when you add that to the idea of what's happened in the last couple of years with the pandemic, and then the 10 years previous to that with the war on small business, kind of the pandemic was the straw that broke the camel's back in this situation, where they took out the majority of the mom and pops backup infrastructure, I'm going to call it, for an economy. They broke people. They shut them down, from restaurants to other kinds of small businesses, gone. And then when you look in Florida, you can bet that some of the more corporate sellers of things are going to get their insurance paid for. They're going to rebuild in the same places. They're going to get destroyed again, and they'll continually milk the population, because the population always wants to have that empathy and help out. But nobody ever asks the questions, why do we keep building in disaster zones in the first place? I've done an experiment of my own where I've taken a map of, and these are just different, I'm going to go ahead and say unrelated topics so that no one gets in trouble. But if you put a map of a world map on where the most vaccinated people are, you'll get all the first world countries, Europe, the United States, India, China, and then you overlap that map with, say, birth defects and different kinds of problems. It'll kind of overlap, and I'm not saying that's a pattern, but if you continue down this pattern, you'll start to see these points all around the world that seem to be set up for epic failure. You start noticing that the biggest metropolises are all built in the worst places, like LA, San Francisco, Miami, et cetera, et cetera. They're all either in a hurricane zone or an extreme earthquake zone. Our entire civilization seems to have been planned out from the beginning to fail, to eventually have an empire failing event. And
ransom. Now that would be an expiry date that was already put into this.
Yeah, it seems to be
like
there.
Fiat currencies have an expiry date as well.
Right. And, it seems like they've been planning that because they know that they reset. We've talked about that before. The people that are keeping the most old knowledge, and there are examples of how that have bled through to the common man, or we wouldn't know about the Mayan calendar and all these things that indicate that human beings of some kind or some form have been keeping track of celestial events for at least 52,000 years, 26,000 for the precession of the equinox. But to know that it repeated, they would have had to have a 52,000 year history, which puts us way back before Cro-Magnon man into the time where Neanderthal was still alive, Denisovan, other different, hominins and human beings of different forms. So we know that there was a massive wealth of knowledge. This is a fact. It's not an opinion that's been on the earth for a long time. So if you had that wealth of knowledge, necessarily you've been keeping track for that much time, which means that you probably have been keeping track of the weather cycles with or without technological help. You would have kept track of the fall and rise of empires throughout time. And we know that pretty much there's been an inherited line of leadership and what they call the right to rule from the earliest of, holy men or kings of each little village. And that line has it has existed in history all the way to this day. These are the same people that have that knowledge. So they know exactly when the cycles turn, when it's time to pull the plug, when it's time to, take all of their wealth and redistribute it in the places that they're going to need it for the next phase. And you see that with the royal family right now. They're trying to slip away kind of into the dark while the newest kind of connection between them is the king is one of the World Economic Forum people, along with Klaus Schwab and all of these other people. And it's no mystery what they're planning to do, because they like to brag. They want to reduce the population. And just think about what was his dad is the guy that said he wanted to come back as a virus and kill 99% of the population. So this is the framework and the mindset of the people who are actually factually in control right now. So should we believe them at their word that they're going to, and that they are reducing populations right now? Because every indicator says now is the time. Now's the time they're going to pull the plug on food, energy, and lifespan for the normal, regular Homo sapiens sapien that I think is at that time that Neanderthal was at 42,000 years ago.
Well, that would involve having the same ruler class still at that same time, which brings me to an interesting thought that you brought up in my mind when I was thinking about that. You know, if we do follow Michael Tellinger's work, and South Africa was set up as a gold mining operation some 400,000 years ago by quote unquote the Anunnaki. If you were to believe that, then think 4 at the minimum interglacials, because it doesn't really talk about when the spaceships arrived 400,000 years ago, if it was during the interglacial, at the beginning of the interglacial, at the end of the interglacial. But you know, at that point, eventually you're going to roll into another 100,000 years later, and another 100,000 years later, and another 100,000 years later, which would be coming into our 80,000-year-old Lemurian legends and stories, down to the Denisovans, the same rulers, the same keepers of time, and the same ones that were here as overseers of the earth. I'm just going to say, for 400,000 years, the protocol has been keep the labor supply functioning and the refined metals coming. Pretty much you're on the farm called Earth. But we know that statement says that those same rulers that were here and 400,000 years ago to oversee the gold mines would be the same ones. At that point, you're talking about from that rollover from whatever, Denisovans to Cro-Magnon, Neanderthals, and then here we sit again. So you might, coming back down into the 3,000 years and the royals disappearing, that sort of length of time, that could be a distraction too, because look, you're only looking back 3,000 years when really you should be looking 400,000 years into the past. Because you go, oh yeah, well, you said, because when I talk about the elections coming up, I'm like, yeah, okay, I get it. But truly ask yourself, has anything changed? Or has it been the same progression of history through humanity over the last 2,000 to 3,000 years? The same people are in control, causing the wars, causing the economy or inflation and deflation, fiat collapses, and whatever it is, the trades, the exploitation of trade, however you frame anything. It's been like that, the same people in control for at least 3,000, maybe back to the Sumerians 7,000 years ago, but for sure a solid 3,000 years. And suddenly, like something's going to change. The only thing that can change is when we take the power back in our own hands and decide to do something instead of giving our power away to others. You're giving your power away to politicians for them to create solutions for you that we all should have created for ourselves in our communities and our neighborhoods. We're definitely going to need to get back into home gardening again with your neighbors. Because you got to realize one thing is people are more productive at different times of the day. That's a basic. Some people are morning people. Like me, I used to really start functioning after like 4 o'clock p.m. I'm just go until 2 a.m. or something. Like that's my sweet spot. In the morning, I'll get stuff done I will. But if you have a community garden, everybody's at their highest time of productivity to go in and work the garden. So if let's say 8 people are working in let's say 3 families have 8 people together and all their backyards adjoin each other. Like those 8 people taking care of that, because somebody gets up early before work, somebody comes back after work, someone's there in the middle of the day. There's always something being done, and those 8 people can do so much more work than, even 2 or 3 people could by themselves. I mean, orders of magnitude, much larger output. So, these are the kind of things that we would have to take back, and at the same time, in unity across the planet. And see, Ransom, you alluded to that too. Like, why wouldn't people just stop obeying the laws and, start forming their own, trading blocks in the communities and that sort of thing? See, everybody if you just say, I don't obey anymore in whatever the civil laws were, all these laws written, just no. If everybody were to do it on the planet at the same time, again, it takes that whole unity thing to take hold, where the rulers are like, okay, we just can't do this one anymore. Okay, next. And this is why we get in this chain of events, because people do push back, but then they're always at next, until humanity stamps up to each and every single one of those, and then it's next. I don't care how far back we go in time. It always has been like that until the humanity or the civil or the population in the civilization says, nope, we're done, and then they always move to the next. Because, talking about Jupiter back in the Roman gods and, even back prior to Greek, whatnot, you still think about how many times just go over the last 2,500 years in Italy, all the way from the Roman Empire forward. Like, how many times did people say no and fight back and say no and fight back and say no and fight back? And country after country, and France was the same. France was the same. France was the same. England the same. England the same. It's always this distraction thing out there. Nothing ever seems to change except those in power retain their power, and they create even more wealth extracted from the world populace. Those are the 2 things that I've seen through time that always, once a population starts to get itself together, there's always something there that will break it apart. Planned, of course, because I like that chapter from history from the Bolshevik Revolution. And I encourage everybody out there please learn about how Lenin was so integral. So this is the thing. This is the scariest thing about it. It only took a group of 2 men to begin to start the Bolshevik Revolution, and then 2 more to come in and get a newspaper to create an entire movement in a country to demonize every farmer, to take over the Ukraine and literally fence that entire country in and let more than 10 people starve to death, or 10 million, 10 million people starve to death at the minimum. And you see, as you go back going back into the records again, if you had 400,000 years of records of climate and civilization, and you've been through the Denisovans to the Neanderthal to Cro-Magnon down to Homo sapien and lived it all, and that's only one ice age when they've lived through 4 of these ice ages. Because I'm always interested, like, what happened in the last pre-interglacial? Okay, 10,000 years ago, there was another 10,000 years of warmth. Where are they? You look and you say 400,000 years. Is the illusion it's almost like you're living 400,000 years. So I'll boil it down to a question. 400,000 years. Do you think it's long enough time to get tech up to create a hologram literally around humanity, or an individual person in the realm that would mimic reality so perfectly that what we consider now metaverse is going back like hundreds of thousands of years into like the very beginning of it? To try to introduce the concept where we already are right now, but hundreds of thousands of years in advance. I don't know, I'm losing my mind, man. It's a complex topic.
Now, did I get that straight? You were saying that the metaverse is like a repeat of how we started out the first time, or that it's taken this long to get into a technological state where we're ready to control, because I think that's the thing, that we are in a technological era. With the right social engineering, they can plug everyone in and feed them a complete, controlled fake reality. It's already almost that way now with belief systems, media, Then you got entertainment, and then social media, and all of these different things. So there is already a fake hologram around you. But we're talking about now technologically that we're going to skip forward and either directly or indirectly access the brain through either genetic means or electronic means. And like they said, free will is over. The human being is completely programmable. So they actually believe this. Whether or not it's true or not, I don't know. It seems like right now would be that time for a worldwide thought experiment. If you could reach everyone in the world, or maybe you only need 1/10 of the world to be thinking about something, but that something should be disconnecting from whatever artificial structure that has control of things. And it's only going exponential. I mean, back to the depopulation thing. Did you ever imagine a time where they were just going to be telling you that, young people drop dead all the time here and there? Athletes are dropping dead, the most fit people in the world. Think about what that does to people that are training to become one of these athletes, or just a young person in general that wants to play sports. And all they see is people their age group dropping dead from heart attacks all of a sudden, and the system telling them, no, that's normal, that's always happened, don't worry about it, that's just something that happens. Maybe the world's so bad that you just shouldn't have kids. I mean, have you ever heard people say that? Because I have. I don't want to have kids. I mean, this world's messed up. I wouldn't want to bring a young one into this world. Well, guess what? If people don't, there won't be a world for anybody to live in, because there will be no future in it. And that's the program being programmed right now in the hologram, but also that it would be so cool to be completely infected with electronics to the point where you live in a completely imaginary reality. And we're close to that right now. I mean, I think that everything that we've been seeing as far as the bizarre laws about what you can say or what you can do because you don't want to offend anybody are just preparations for further making people accept a false reality. They're already doing it now. People will say that things are not bad, that are bad, and it's would be obvious to any moral person that some things are bad, but now they're acceptable. And you know what? You're weird and you're bad if you don't accept them. And that idea can just spread. Wait till they're mobbing on people because they want to eat meat and real vegetables instead of something grown in a lab, because now we're just growing vegetable and protein products to have fake meat and fake vegetables. Now, I know they're just growing them in a tube now, and now there's, all these products that are beyond belief. That's what I call it, beyond belief. But wait till a couple generations when your kid would rather just stick a tube in his arm and get back to his gaming, or get back to the metaverse with all of their social interactions, because they no longer really do that. And at that point, I mean, you would need a robot in the house to notify the authorities that you're not hooked to the system. And if such a thing existed, why would they want you connected is the question, because it still seems that there's a niche necessary in this new, formation of reality that involves a human being to either power it or, in some way be part of this mechanism. But it doesn't seem to be in the control end of the connection. It seems to be in the product section, or and I hate to keep going back to sci-fi movies, but that idea in the Matrix about just turning everybody into a battery isn't really that far-fetched, especially if you did just feed them some paste in a tube while they were connected to a metaverse. You could take every bit of their wealth energy, their mind energy, their emotional energy, and maybe possibly, from things I've read, actual electricity. And then that brings us full circle back to what you told me to remind you about. What is this reset going to be powered off of? Is it going to be powered off of classical petroleum products in the background, like it seems to be unfolding, where they're telling you to get electric cars, this, that, and the other thing, but really it's just all powered by petroleum products. We continue to deforest and dump chemicals, and that brings us back to what powers it: electro fuels. You told me to remind you about that. where are we going? What is going to be allowed as an energy source for these smaller populations of transhumans?
Good, you broke it down in it. The transhuman club, cult, tribe, and then the non-tech, there'll be a new name for that, the non-tech sapiens. Because you hit it on the head there, a sub-program in the hologram. Because think about the human mind as a 3D printer. The human creativity force rearranging atoms and molecules through thought for instances to come into your physical reality and be bent and morphed into something. Now, think of it as a 3D printer. Like a wish and a dream is nothing more than, your crystal ball. And what does that bring to you in the future then? If you could harness that power, even in the metaverse, you could still create reality on the outside in the real physical universe, even though it's connected to the computer program, which is still where? Still on the planet. See, it doesn't matter if the human goes into the technocratic bliss wonderland and everything is as in the Matrix, where they're sitting there in those little small fetal tube things being fed with tubes and whatnot. They're still on the planet, unless they take them off planet. You're still located on Earth as it spins through with this solar system, so you're still bound to some rules here. And fortunately for us, those rules are you can bend reality and morph it and tweak it if your thought process is clean and targeted enough, and if it's repetitious enough, and if it's focused enough, and it's visualized enough. Then, boom, something just pops in front of you. And it's really weird how it happens, but it does. Now, I'm sure that before, in the golden ages, talking about the Indian yugas, where they could manifest instantly. Okay, it takes a bit longer now because we just come out of the Iron Age and we're finally ascending vibrational lightness. Every single day is getting a little bit lighter down the, literally I'm talking in a circle of vibration of the highest you could possibly go in a human species, or like a sapien, some sort of physical being on this planet, or all the way down to the lowest, which we just passed in probably like, 1600. So it's not been that long since we came off the very, 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 very lowest that a human form could vibrate in this plane and exist. Like literally at the very bottom at the 6 o'clock hour before it comes on to 6:01, 6:02, 6:03. Okay, it's getting lighter. Hey, every time you tick up 1 minute, the vibration changes. Whoa. Light seems faster. Oh, wait, the planet sped up. What do you mean? Jet streams also, and this isn't no BS assessment either. The planet has sped up, and they can't explain why. The vibrations change. Things move faster when vibration changes. The vibrational and the frequency and the electrical flow, if you believe in electromagnetism, powering and pushing both of those with the base layer on it, that's changed. Why is the planet spinning faster? That's a calculable release by NASA. NOAA. Everybody out there was talking about the fastness and the speed. But then the South Atlantic anomaly has increased in its size and magnetic canceling. You got to realize that's connected directly to Earth from the Van Allen radiation belt. So the more power that's out there above, say, 300 miles, so 250 to 300 miles above the planet, in there's an electrified band, and they're called F layers. And if you're thinking about how that's it's just a bit strange also. And then at the same time, double jet streams are now being experienced over Europe. Loss of jet stream stability. And I do believe it was in 2019, they had the fastest winds that they'd ever recorded in the jet stream And that's why those several airliners made record time across the Atlantic and the Pacific both, excuse me. And that was in 2019. Record jet winds, propelled aircraft were record times where they arrived like an hour early, and it made the news because the wind speeds were so fast, record fast. So you start to look around, and we're really seeing a lot of these different on the ground and above. There shall be signs in the skies. You know, Jupiter glows more brightly. Double jet streams are forming, and they can't explain why. They just say it increased all the heat waves for the year. But what says to me is double jet stream forming means that the planting and harvesting dates are out of sync, or they will be from this point forward, even further out of sync. So understand it's the natural change. That's what we're experiencing now and in the process of experiencing. Now, if you understand what's going on, it's quite fascinating to watch it all. If you don't know, it's very terrifying. Now, if you bring it into the realms of masking that, we're looking at the lowest fertilizer production, you know, taking us back to the cusp of the Green Revolution in the 1950s. The fertilizer production for the year of 2022, and just in those first few months of, or the last few months of 2021, when they were putting down ammonium in the fields, the entire global total of lost amount of fertilizers, herbicides, pesticides, and fungicides, which are the ones that stops mold if it gets too wet, and fungus. 20% globally down 2022. Crop production down 2022 is 20%. Everywhere you look, there are massive losses. Massive. So if you look at it again, is it really the jet streams that are bending where they can't plant and harvest on time, so they're going to blame that event on the fertilizer shortages? See, the masking event has to be so all-encompassing that you will not notice that it was a natural event from start to finish. So when the global warming, in my opinion, narrative came about, it was the very beginning of the change that we're seeing now that are amplified and extreme on these known cycles of natural variability or change. If you want to go 400,000 years in the past, or if you just want to stay in the last 5,000. Somebody knows these cycles, how they come, how they go, the intensity of it. Because I did a lot of research back 2,400 years in the last 6 of these grand solar minimums. And you go back further in data charts and all the way back to, let's say, the Younger Dryas era, 12,000 plus years, 12,500 years ago. You find that massive cooling at 8,200 years before the present, or like 6,200 years BC plus 2,000 years, and you get to 8,200 years. Massive cooling drop off, and that was the only last time that it's happened. But the way that the magnetic field was then, things have changed drastically on this planet. So for me, looking into this data, at a very stretch, I would look and say, all right, if I could get the best records even the Mayans had, the Aztec had, the Olmecs had, go back into the Chinese, further 4,000 years into the past, get everything from the Middle East prior to even when you're going back into like the seedlings of yam and sorghum production on the planet beginning in West Africa, like Mauritania, back when it was a desert, like that old of information, understanding the cycles. Like the domestication of the yam in West Africa time. If you understood it from that point forward, instead of me having 6 or 7 good 400-year cycles, and then you can get some proxy data on how much it rained or how drought it was, and the flow of things from streams, the heavier the debris, the more water. You know, you can do a lot of calculations with these things. But that's the data they have. So imagine if you were so technologically savvy and you knew all these points, even going back 5,000 years. Oh, I could give you the most accurate forecast you would ever want, and literally, I could wire it within a week of a month of a year if I could have that much data to program and look through. Now imagine again, if you're able to retain power through 4 different ice ages and 4 interglacials because the tech was so superior in South Africa 400,000 years ago to do the gold mining at that point, and I'm just saying hypothetically, you would know down to the second each event that would occur on the planet or within the hour of changes of a double jet stream forming. If you had 400,000 years of grand solar minimum data, which occurs about every 400 years, you're talking like 10,000 points to get high and low temps. Different areas on the planet that cooled, different areas that became more moist, like North Africa and the Sahel. And you can start to pick and do some of this if you do enough looking around at prior cultures. Like you got the reason that go back to the Ghana Empire and see what the Ghana Empire, and Ransom, I'll ask you if you could pull up a chart here, like the Empire of Ghana. It stretched all the way from what we know as like Saudi Arabia with the Aksum, way out to Mauritania, clear over to the Atlantic Ocean. Trade routes through every single country. It was more widespread than Rome was. Vastly wealthy, trading salt, trading gold, coinage, precious metals, spices, herbs, frankincense root control. This is a huge history part that we're never, ever, ever taught about. But what allowed that vast kingdom to rise in what we know as vast solid desert today in the middle of it? These changes come way faster than they do, say, in the geologic record or the history books that we understand. These changes, these massive changes, come in a blink of an eye. They have an instance of a full retreat coming out of glaciation within a 10-year period. But they also have instance going back, I think it was like 1.2 million years ago, where it flipped, flipped into an ice age condition as little as 10 years also, which I found interesting, that the 1 decade change, either flipping it out or flipping it into 10 years. I mean, we've all lived through 10 years. Can you imagine if our planet turns into an ice age onset where there's high pressure that builds for thousands of years over one area, and that just turns on one day? And from that point over 10 years, it just, whoa, and then you're in an ice age. Like the entire climate has shifted, where you could not plant and harvest anything on the planet. You'd only be able to do it indoor or be down near the equator. Like this is the kind of change that is trying to be masked right now, some level of that in between. We're in it, it's all natural. And what's the next distraction? Yeah, Ransom, I the electrofuels I'll come back to, but I had that one question, like, after the dark winter, what is planned for this World Economic Forum? They brought us to the dark winter, but what's the mass amount release of media of story that everybody would know after the dark winter?
A story that everybody would know. And you were talking about going back in time and looking at stuff. So the whole time, I was kind of referring back to some of the articles I showed a minute ago. So go back to the one in Bangladesh. 140 million people plunged into darkness. And then the article I showed before that was Swiss companies offer fortified luxury bunkers for the apocalypse. We're complete with garages, pools, everything's nice and electric down there. It's in a bunker. It's underneath. It's protected from solar events, etc. But then you got topside, total blackout. So, obviously, if 140 million people can be plunged into darkness over some weird mystery in the power grid, imagine if something actually happened. So for a minute, I want to take you down a sci-fi reminiscent of a movie or a book, if you want to. I like the movie, the recent movie, but The Time Machine by H.G. Wells. Childlike Eloy and the savage simian Morlocks, distant descendants of the contemporary upper and lower classes, one above, one below. The people below still have technology. The people below have the military force. The people below even have found a way to make themselves have psychic powers. Now, the people above are just regular, normal humans, an agrarian civilization, no electricity. They just eat what they eat. They grow what they grow. And they are actually the product of that. So think about the timeline there, which is kind of bizarre. So in the H.G. Wells story, at least the movie, he goes to the future, and he goes to the future about 2037, in which the moon is falling apart. Now, I don't know if that's, has anything to do with anything. But what I do find ironic is if you rewind if he would have stopped in 2022, he'd have found out that nations of the world are now planning to mine the moon because we've confirmed the existence of, crystals and stuff that have H3, a very powerful, fuel that we could use to do all kinds of stuff. So obviously we'll be up there mining before long. So in the story in 2037, something happens from the mining, something happens to the moon. But anyway, some kind of apocalypse happens. And then he goes to the future, in which you find these two types of civilizations: a transhuman governmental system that only consumes, that has all of the technology, etc. And they live underground in their luxurious bunkers. Right? They live in their luxurious bunkers, but the people above have no power, no lights, no nothing, no knowledge, nada. They don't have anything. They've been completely reset. And, that was the saying in the movie about the Eloi and the Morlocks there. The Eloi were the childlike version. And we were talking about the metaverse and how everybody just wants to be in there, not have children, no responsibilities, universal income, social credit score, and just a game world, a fake reality. And then on the other half, you have the Morlocks, the people with the money, the people with the tech, the people with the power, the breakaway civilization that plans to run the other civilization kind of behind the shadows, and every once in a while cull them for whatever reason they do. Mostly for their own energy source. So, that's ironic. It's just a story. However, you can see that sci-fi is, catching up to reality, or reality is catching up to sci-fi. I don't know how you want to put it. But we're living in a world right now where the billionaires are moving. The millionaires are trying to move. CEOs are quitting. Everybody knows something's up. Something's about to happen. Everything's being redrawn, redesigned, new rivalries are forming, new deals are forming with economics, food, etc. You see Saudi Arabia deciding to go in the direction of China and Russia. And where do we go with our conflicts? If we deal with Russia, that the Chinese government has plainly said they will back up Russia. Well, obviously Russia will back up the Chinese in the Pacific arena, there where we're already having high tensions, and not to mention a buildup of troops. As you recall, they removed the fleet that had been there since the 50s during the Obama administration. Well, guess what? We're sending a brand new aircraft carrier in there with a record number of 9,000 people on it, with probably some new tech. So things are about to get interesting, and you can see how it kind of lines up with any number of sci-fi dystopic futures. It seems like they gave us a little portion in each one, and if you put them together, you get the Great Reset. That's what it is. We're doing it. And I'm not trying to be a pessimist, because I still believe that there's power in people, power in intention, power in empathy, and power of will. So it's obvious that communities are going to have to form that are anti-establishment in everything that they do. And you can kind of use an example of that. If things do go rough, who's going to build the barn with you? You've seen the Amish throw up a barn in one day with their whole community. You're not doing that by yourself. You're just not going to. So unless you want to live a future of begging to the government, to the powers for your rations, or you want to, hunt and gather, a little bit here and a little bit there, you only have one choice, and that's to make a stand now, change your life now. Spread that idea where people are now, going into a new renaissance. We have the ability, we have the technology, we have the information still. It's not gone yet. So we could have a renaissance of people that learn how to be self-sufficient, power themselves freely, and, maybe start working on the planet that we're, it's so funny that they're clear-cutting forest in the name of the green movement. And no one talks about, all of the genetic pollution. We got 150 million mosquitoes that somebody made in the lab, Bill Gates, and they just let those that's just one example of many of what I call genetic pollution. And I'm not trying to say it like in a eugenics way. I'm just saying that they're hijacking the genetic code and the, I guess, cultural code and it's all being reprogrammed. And like I said before, you have to have a reset. You have to turn it off in order to have the new control mechanism take place. So if we could fight the reset, if we could not be turned off, if we could find ways to be self-sufficient and communal with like-minded people that are willing to educate themselves and be self-sufficient and do their part as far as independently, but also in a community. And no, I'm not talking about socialism. I'm not talking about forcing anybody to do nothing. Obviously, people that don't want to participate will be on the other side of things, the so-called hunters and gatherers. But the truth is, in human history, there's never been really hunters and gatherers. They've been producers and they've been takers. And that's the only two kind of people we've ever had. And that's the final battle we have now. Will we succumb to the takers, or will we become a society of producers and overcome their reset?
I'm for overtaking the reset and installing Tesla technologies, because I think that, you mentioned what's the next card after the dark winter. Would it be a fake alien invasion? Oh, the craft crashes. Suddenly we have Tesla free energy devices introduced into the planet. United One World Government set up. Awesome. Thanks for playing. David Dubine, Ramsey Godwin.